One of the harshest revelations that modern humans have to suffer is that entropy will take everything and everyone. All buildings, all machines, and all human bodies will eventually crumble, fail, and be reduced to ruin. The only hope lies in the longevity of things before entropy takes hold. Cardano's competitors currently seem to be in the initial throes of gagging on that bitter pill. Ethereum is sagging and bulging under the immense weight of absurd fees and constant security failures, while the Solunavaxes seem plagued by hasty design meant to answer the call of the race to market. Meanwhile, Cardano was made for longevity, and we're fresh out of Heimlichs for you competitors. Ready? Let's go. Today, we're going to discuss yet another big Robbery Forest event, the unmasking of some previous Robbery Forest attackers, claims of a huge Metamask iPhone vulnerability for you EVM sidechainers to take note of, some very harsh criticism of Solana, Cardano going to Everest, and what looks like a little progress, some more little progress on the Cardano Summit NFTs. If you are out there healthily resisting entropy, or if you're finding value in these videos each weekday, except this week because of the travel that we've talked about previously, please consider delegating to the Army of Spies stake pool, ticker AOS. You ever notice how there's always a gigantic difference between the way a team actually announces an exploit of their protocol versus the way the rest of the crypto space talks about the exploit? Like, this is very typical. This is like the classic "we've been hacked" announcement. Beanstalk Farms says Beanstalk suffered an exploit today. The Beanstalk Farms team is investigating the attack and will make an announcement to the community as soon as possible. What's missing here? Maybe the most important thing. How big was it? Are we talking about coins worth 1 USD? Or are we talking about coins worth 80 million USD? These two things are very different. Unfortunately for Beanstalk Farms, in this case, it was $80 million, not $1. Why do we know it's always going to be the 80 million and not the $1? Because if it was $1, they would just replace the $1 and never tell anyone. It's only the big exploits we hear about because they can't replace the money. Watcher Guru says, just in, stablecoin protocol Beanstalk Farms has reportedly been hacked for more than 80 million. What's amazing is we've talked about it a million times, but this isn't even a big deal anymore. It's like another protocol in the Robbery Forest got robbed for 80 million. Why? Always various different reasons. But for me, the primary reason, the biggest predictor of whether something's going to get robbed or not is where it's located. If it's located in the Robbery Forest, it's probably more likely to get robbed. According to this post from @RightSideOnly, this was kind of an interesting exploit. They used a flash loan to buy a lot of the protocol's tokens. Then they created a governance proposal to allow for unlimited minting of those tokens. Then they used the tokens they bought with the flash loan to vote on the governance proposal successfully, which allowed them to mint unlimited tokens. And then they went over and swapped them in Curve for stable coins, drained the treasury. He or she says the exploit drained only 75 million, but at the end of the day, I don't think we really care. 80 million, 75 million, it's all too much. This should be a good lesson for Cardano protocols. Governance can also create vulnerabilities. Over the weekend, we also found out the identity of the groups involved in the Axie Infinity exploit. It was our good buddy Kim Jong Un over here through the Lazarus group and APT. I'm assuming that's apartment 38 hacker groups. Maybe APT stands for something completely differently, but in my mind, apartment 38. These hacker groups are North Korean related hacker groups. You can see our good buddy Kim Jong Un over here. Now that he's got all the Axie Infinity money, He's become kind of a business commie. He can't just be a normal commie with like the tan colored commie outfit. Now he's kind of a business commie. It's like when you're a commie, but you got to go do business with like bankers and stuff like that. Like you got to attend meetings with stockbrokers. You got to have the pinstriped commie outfit. This is much more business like. He can't go full suit. He can't go full suit like these two guys. He's got to have the pinstripes. Why? Because my guy is like double the size his soldier over here. He needs the slimming effect of those pinstripes. If you use Cardano EVM sidechains, you need to be aware of this. Nico Arqueros is trying to bring your attention to this problem he's citing as a terrifying scam, and I think he is 100% correct. Here's the way this was initially posted. This poster at Serpent says Metamask actually saves your seed phrase file on your iCloud. If you know anything about the security of your seed phrase, this is going to sound very terrifying to you, and you're going to be asking, how could this possibly be the case? A little further reading in this thread suggests that it's not quite this, but the end result is basically this. So this poster tells a horror story about someone getting 650K stolen out of their MetaMask because their Apple ID was compromised. And of course, if this is actually the case, if your seed phrase is somehow filed on your iCloud and someone gets a hold of your Apple ID, then all of your security is out the window. Of course, he was challenged on this. People were asking, of course, why would MetaMask ever do this? This goes against every principle of crypto wallet security. And eventually he posted this. Here's MetaMask's response to my thread, breaking down how the iCloud backup works. So it's actually a backup problem. MetaMask said, if you have enabled iCloud backup for app data, so if you enabled iCloud backup for your app data on your phone or other device, this will include your password encrypted MetaMask vault. If your password isn't strong enough and someone phishes your iCloud credentials, this can mean stolen funds, and apparently they have a thread on it. So it's not that MetaMask is intentionally storing your seed in iCloud. It's that if you turn on iCloud backup for app data, then app data, including your MetaMask vault, which will be encrypted with your password, will be stored in iCloud. And if they're able to crack your password or otherwise bypass your password, then your security is over. You're done. MetaMask says you can disable iCloud backups for MetaMask specifically by turning off the toggle here, and then they give you some steps. They also say if you want to avoid iCloud surprising you with unrequested backups in the future, you can turn off this feature at settings and then these steps. I don't personally use Apple products, but I know many of you do, so it might be a good idea to look into this deeply if you're using MetaMask for Cardano EVM sidechains and you are an Apple person. The Cardano community is pound for pound by far the strongest community in crypto. Look at this post. Arthur Prestage didn't make Camp 1 this morning. Need more acclimatization. Early days and a long way to go. ETA for Cardano flag on Everest summit, 4 to 5 weeks. Good job and good luck, Arthur. Cardano Everest summit, 4 to 5 weeks. There are a lot of hilarious things that Ada Will talks about that make me happy, but this was a special one. A few days ago, he subtly announced that someone was attempting to get a Solunavax entry into Urban Dictionary, and here we are. Solunavax, a blockchain protocol that is majority owned and centrally administered by a group of venture capitalists that are usually US and often San Francisco Bay Area based. Instead of the usual properties of a cryptocurrency exhibited by the likes of, for instance, Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Cardano, decentralized, secure, and scalable. These are the legs, of course, of the blockchain trilemma. These blockchain protocols are typically neither secure nor decentralized or even generally stable, while potentially achieving scaling that comes close to Microsoft SQL Server 2019. Certain versions of this come with a VC on-off switch out of the box. Others have a complete Ponzi scheme baked in. All of them come with highly toxic but generally fluid communities that are financially incentivized to lash out at everything that's not a Solunavax. Excellent work on this. And if you have a friend, coworker, or relative who loves one or all of the Solunavax protocols, there's even now a very expensive mug you can buy them from Urban Dictionary store that will let them know exactly what Solunavax means. Not sponsored by Urban Dictionary, by the way. If you didn't think things are bad for our competitors, then you should check out this thread from @Justin_bonds. He starts out politely enough. He says, I do not support Solana, far too many red flags. But then you notice that this is a thread of 25 individual tweets, and you think to yourself, that's a lot of tweets for such a subtle disapproval. But before we even get out of his first tweet, he starts to get a little bit more serious. He says, a blockchain with downtime is unacceptable. Now Solana is unacceptable, apparently. He says, Solana is suffering from the consequences of their own design decisions. Now he gets really serious. There are many examples of lies, fraud, and bad design. This is interesting. He's publicly calling them out for what he labels lies, fraud, and bad design. Disclaimer, I'm not presenting any of this as fact. I'm simply reading his tweets. He says, Sol is not innovative at all. It is just the first major chain that decided to be so reckless in terms of fundamental design. Most VCs just do not understand the engineering trade-offs and the inherent risks involved. He says, a consequence of proof of history is deterministic block creation. Before Solana, almost all major blockchains use non-deterministic block creation. It adds to security and censorship resistance as you cannot predict who will create the next block. Get that? Proof of history makes block creation deterministic. You can determine who's actually going to validate the next block. Before Solana, many were non-deterministic because you don't want attackers to know who is going to validate the next block. He says in Solana, it is possible to predict and therefore attack the next block producers in line. For instance, attacking the next 100 validators in line instead of attacking the entire network. This attack also works regardless of scale, thereby severely reducing Solana security. This kind of makes sense. If you don't know who the next block validator is, you would have to attack 51% of the network. This is a 51% attack to have a to have a majority chance that you're attacking the next validator. But in Solana, if you know who the next 100 validators are, you could just attack those 100 validators and you will have attacked the validator of all of the blocks that are about to be validated. I know some of you are jumping out of your chairs right now saying that's not what a 51% attack is. A 51% attack involves having 51% of the validation power, like 51% of the hash power in a proof of work network. And what we're talking about here is executing distributed denial of service attacks on the validators that are going to validate the blocks. I know, I get the difference. I'm just pointing out that when you have deterministic block creation, you can attack a much smaller number of validators and have a huge impact on the chain. By tweet 16, he is keyed into something that we've talked about on this channel before. He says, in Solana, several consensus mechanisms are counted as transactions, which validators have to carry out, which means validators also pay the transaction fee for these mechanisms, unlike most other chains. This results in validation being far more expensive than it needs to be, unnecessarily centralizing the network. Estimates are upwards of 6 million USD. I believe he means 6 million USD there in order to run a validator profitably. The strange thing about this specific design choice is that there is no trade-off, unlike Proof of History and Turbine, which does trade decentralization for scalability. I think a lot of people realize that Solana has probably traded decentralization for scalability. But here he's pointing out that this phenomenon he's talking about doesn't actually result in any positive side, any positive trade. He also says counting consensus mechanisms as transactions gives no objective advantage. This is another thing he thinks has no actual trade-off. He says all that I can think of is that it does make Solana appear as if it has a higher TPS than it really has. This is something that has been covered by people in the Cardano ecosystem as well. He says if that is why this design choice was made, that would be extremely deceptive and crooked behavior. Since I first released this critique, I've had the opportunity to debate these issues with some of the founders. However, I've not heard an adequate explanation for this particular design choice. I could be missing something and I would love to be corrected. But he says, as it stands now, I cannot find a good reason why you would design a blockchain in that way, leading me to believe that this is a case of the Sol team consciously prioritizing attracting ignorant investors over good blockchain design, deception through obfuscation. It is shocking how many professional investors have fallen for these tricks. The VC supports Solana gain says a lot about the maturity of the ecosystem. There's still a severe lack of understanding of blockchain fundamentals, as I would not touch Solana with a 10-foot pole. He concludes by saying, Solana was caught lying about the initial circulating supply. Solana made false statements around TPS. Solana design heavily leans towards scalability in context of the blockchain trilemma, while pretending as if that is innovative. He says, earnest attempts at scaling through sharding, sidechains, and state channels preserve decentralization. Just throwing hardware at the problem is not innovative at all. This is how Solana rose to prominence, even going so far as to double down on very bad security assumptions. He says, I would praise Solana if it pivoted and fixed these flaws. The problem is that it would require changing the very attributes that were sold as features to investors. Human nature tends to double down on such mistakes, especially considering the money involved in such a ruse. Again, not presenting any of that as fact. These are I'm just reading this Justin Bond's thread, but if any of that is accurate and true, very damning appraisal of Solana. Finally, in the long ongoing saga of the Cardano Summit 2021 NFTs, it looks like we'll be getting some kind of an actual launch date this week, if I'm reading this correctly. Joshua Miller says info is coming out next week, and we see from the data this was on the 16th. So I'm guessing this week we'll get the date. He says, we are just putting the comms together with a demo walkthrough of the whole thing to release with the launch date. We period, our period, their period. I'm excited to finally see these things. I hope you're starting out a great week. This is going to be a short week for me. You'll get fewer videos than normal, but I hope you're starting a great week, and I will talk to you tomorrow.